where the other side was reeling from the psychological, emotional, and otherwise effects of the devastation the Romans wreaked on them.
In the ensuing slaughter, Togodumnus is mortally wounded. Stricken, the survivors vanish into the swamps. The families of the Druid leaders awaken to a new reality. Word of the catastrophe triggers a panic and a scramble to escape. Caradicus and his family must also flee, or face humiliation and slavery at the hands of the Romans.
When the Romans won a significant military victory, the general was traditionally awarded the right to hold what we think of as a ticker tape parade, what they called a triumph. If possible, the leader of the conquered forces was marched throughout the parade to display in his or her person the subjugation of the foreign people. And traditionally, that person was then executed at the end of the parade as an enemy of the Roman people.
Caradicus has no intention of being a Roman trophy. Swearing revenge, he gathers his supporters and leads them on a long journey west to the rugged hill country where the heart of the Druid establishment lies. Caradicus correctly assumes that the Romans will not follow. Instead, they plant themselves on the banks of the Thames. Third-century historian Dio.
Because of the troubles he had encountered on the Thames, Plautius became afraid. Instead of advancing any further, he proceeded to guard what he had already won and sent for Claudius.
But is it really fear that stops Plautius, or politics?
I doubt a man of experience and ability of Plautius would have been daunted too much by a river like the Thames. It seems more likely to me that he was given orders that at a suitable point, once a certain beachhead had been established, once there was a certain hinterland that the Romans could operate in, that the emperor be summoned, that he should show up in person to establish that military credibility which he so badly needed.
Emperor Claudius attempts to sail to Britannia. His ship is nearly lost off the Spanish coast, and he must march instead through Gaul to Gosariacum, present-day Boulogne, before finally crossing the Channel. It is late in the campaigning season by the time he arrives.
We know that the emperor showed up in style. He came with cohorts of his personal bodyguard, the so-called Praetorian Guard, and he also came with elephants. Which is something, obviously, it's not an animal native to Britain or anywhere in Western Europe, so by showing up with elephants, he was really announcing his presence. And then he supervised, probably from a safe distance in the rear, the capture of various towns and cities.
Claudius's surprising arrival, coupled with Caradicus's humiliating defeat, prompts many British warlords to submit rather than fight.
We modern people have our own idea of freedom. That's part of our makeup. It's not necessarily the makeup at all of the ancient world. The majority of people simply accustom themselves to their new leadership. The taxes they were paying to leader A, they would now pay to leader B, and it didn't matter much. If they could cut down on any violence that could be made against them by an army, principally that army not being allowed to rape or pillage or destroy their lands, by acquiescence they would.
To resist the Romans or collaborate. In the northern kingdom of Brigantes, the decision looms like an ominous shadow. The choice will be made by their powerful queen, Cartimandua.
The British were willing to stand up behind women who must have been very powerful personalities, who must have had powerful menfolk that they were attached to, I think, who established their status. And then they must have been able to, by dint of force of personality, charisma and so forth, rally their people behind them.
The Queen's husband Venusius has no doubt about which way the Briganti should go. He opposes the Romans with all his heart. In the area that will become known as Wales, there is no indecision either. Here, Britain's fiercest warlords cleave to the old ways and vehemently reject imperial domination. The Druids call upon their gods to drive the Romans from their shores. In their hour of need, they perform their greatest mystery, the sacrifice of a living man. The exiled Caradicus becomes their righteous agent. His passion ignites the resistance.
He was able to combine some of these very disparate tribes of people into an anti-Roman stance by creating a common enemy. This must have made him the most charismatic British person of the time, because how could he go about and convince so many individuals to oppose a Roman war machine?
Bound by common hatred and their ancient religion, the Celts vow to fight on to the bloody end. Victory in battle restores confidence among the Roman rank and file. They no longer fear the British. Little do they know that the worst is yet to come. In 43 AD, Emperor Claudius claims victory in Britannia, even as rebellion takes root on the outskirts of the island. He establishes a Roman province with its capital at Camalodunum, present-day Colchester, where he receives allegiance from a dozen kingdoms. The support of these new allies against the rebels provides a buffer to the fledgling province. After only 16 days in Britain, Claudius returns home. In total, he has been gone just 6 months. But in terms of status, he is light years away from where he started. He is a conqueror.
The propaganda value of such a trip is extraordinary, and it gave him a bump in the political favor of the people in a way that's similar to a modern president visiting his troops on the line, even if he never goes anywhere near the fighting.
3rd century historian Dio.
The Senate gave him the title of Britannicus. They also voted that there should be an annual festival to commemorate the conquest, and that triumphal arches should be erected.
The stunning monuments known as triumphal arches stand as much as 70 feet tall.
He gets a triumphal arch with an inscription commemorating his achievements in conquering Britain. That's to say, a permanent monument in the city of Rome with his name on it that marks Claudius as a great general and a great conqueror. So the military honors are the whole point of the reason to go into Britain. That's the purpose of it, first and foremost, to give Claudius that degree of, as I say, military sort of credibility, military standing that he had formerly lacked.
To Plautius, whom the emperor leaves behind as governor of Britannia, the celebration must seem premature. Anytime the Romans step outside their zone of safety, they become targets of well-orchestrated guerrilla attacks, inspired by Caradicus, the rebel leader.
They would have communicated by means of runners and messengers. And again, knowing the lie of the land, knowing what the quickest ways between the various parts of Britain were, then they would have had an advantage in getting information swiftly between different parts of the island.
Some of the greatest ambushes in history have come from simple logs being rolled down or stones being rolled down onto soldiers below from the mountain above. So here's the Roman. He has his conventional spear, he has his short sword, he's used to close fighting, and suddenly he's having rocks pelted on him, he's having spears thrown at him, he's having axes thrown at him, he's having trees rolled down on him. All of these things take their toll.
The British succeeded in outfoxing the Romans because they knew the terrain, and that local generals, that is British generals, inspired their troops by giving speeches in which they exhorted them to fight off the invaders who wanted to enslave them, that these were foreigners seeking to conquer them.
Caratacus was very effective at fighting what we call a guerrilla warfare. The Romans probably called it terrorism or insurgency, but he would have called it resistance, and this was fairly effective.
Too often the rebels melt away into the forests after an attack. Plautius must crush the resistance or watch it destroy his new province.
This meant that the officers on the ground had to make decisions that were not just straight wrote out of whatever training manuals that they had been taught from, that they actually had to adapt themselves to the terrain and also to the tactics, we might call guerrilla tactics, of their opponents.
In 45 AD, he sends a surge of troops from his headquarters in Camalodunum. 3 legions march south, west, and north. The 9th heads for the land of the Brigantes. The courageous Brigantes control the North Country, an important buffer from other barbarians. For the Roman ambassador, the cooperation of Queen Cartimandua is key.
You're trying to divide and conquer. You're trying to separate and isolate individual groups, subdue them, and having friends on the home fields is a big advantage.
Cartimandua accepts the imperial offer. After all, with a legion on her doorstep, her options are limited.
What good are you doing for your people if the choice is not between freedom and conquest, but between collaboration or destruction? For somebody like Cartimandua, collaborating with Rome allowed her to remain in a position of authority and to risk a great deal less, perhaps personally, than she might have if she'd tried to fight.
Venutius, the queen's consort, vehemently opposes her decision, and he is not alone.
It's to the Romans' advantage to have these arrangements. Now, the problem, of course, is that sometimes, as with Cartimandua, you get a split internally where her husband turns against her.
Venutius chafes on his short leash, but for now, he suffers the queen's will. Bitter but unbowed, he waits for events to change. The Romans roll across the country, subduing one village after another.
The main thing for the Roman governor, particularly in a province that has just been established, is maintaining stability. He has to try to make links with the local community. So any kinds of Romanization, making local people feel comfortable with the Romans there, is to their advantage.
For those who cooperate, the Roman hand is gentle. For those who resist, the vengeance is swift. Soldiers hunt down insurgents and teach them imperial justice at the point of a spear. Every corner turns up troublemakers. But the legionaries find potential converts too. Slowly but surely, they expand Rome's domain, winning hearts and minds as they go. In the arena of Roman politics, General Plautius is a hero. 4 years after the invasion, a grateful Claudius calls him home.